The planetary skies over Gorvaxis Prime cracked open with the thunderclap of a lone drop pod tearing through the atmosphere like a flaming steel bullet. It screamed past the twin moons and streaked over the war parade assembled below, gleaming alien banners, towering war mechs, armored divisions stretching across the scorched valley, and a million soldiers standing at attention under the simmering twin suns. General Kashan barely flinched as the pod slammed into the stone just beyond the dais, casting dust and flame across the elite of the Galactic Empire. His 12 eyes narrowed. The crowd, made up of warlords, diplomats, and smug field marshals, held their breath. They had prepared for many things that day. A lone human drop pod was not one of them. Is this it? Kashan's voice was dry, venomous, with a thin trace of laughter curling at the edges. Earth sends a package? A hiss of hydraulics answered as the pod split open with a gentle puff of steam. From the smoke stepped a figure. Not towering, not monstrous, not encased in any power armor of note. A woman, mid-30s maybe. Slim, unassuming. Her blonde braids swung slightly as she stepped out and stretched her arms like someone finishing a nap. She wore a faded NASA sweatshirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, cargo pants, and boots caked in dust. She carried no visible weapons. She squinted into the sunlight, shielding her eyes. Y'all always hold parades for prisoners of war, or is this a special occasion? Kashan's smirk dropped. The translator droid struggled for a second, unsure how to categorize her tone, playful or mocking. She walked calmly forward, surveying the crowd, then turned to the assembled high command with an easy smile that made several species instinctively lean back. I'm Lieutenant Commander Abigail Volkov, she said brightly. Earth Special Operations Command. Call sign Baba Yaga. She gave a tiny, casual salute. Murmurs broke through the silence. Some laughed. One of the Nakal generals coughed up his drink. The name Baba Yaga was ancient and mythic in human folklore. But in classified alien intel, it was something else entirely. A code name attached to incidents where whole battalions disappeared, where surveillance logs went black, and generals turned up dead in their bunkers with the doors locked from the inside. Kashan stepped forward. Lieutenant Commander, he said, mocking every syllable. You are the only response Earth offers to a galactic ultimatum. She glanced over the immense army behind him, unimpressed. Wouldn't call it an ultimatum if you needed 22 species to say it. Kashan's jaw twitched. One of his advisors leaned in and whispered something. Probably a suggestion to kill her now. Abigail noticed, tilted her head, and said, It's rude to whisper when your guest hasn't even had coffee yet. A small utility bot rolled up beside her, warbling uncertainly. She crouched down and patted it affectionately. Hey little guy, you got anything that resembles espresso, or is it all battery acid out here? The bot beeped, uncertain, then rolled away. Kashan barked, You stand before the assembled war council of the Galactic Empire. You are surrounded, overpowered, and outnumbered. Do you not understand the gravity of your situation? Oh, I absolutely do, she said. You just don't understand mine. The silence that followed was thicker than armor plating. Zergal, the Empire's chief of strategic intelligence, slithered forward from the shadows, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. What is Earth's response? He hissed. You will surrender? Abigail rocked back on her heels. Response? This is the response. Me. Chuckles spread through the crowd again. Nervous ones this time. She took a slow lap around the perimeter of the dais, hands in her pockets, boots crunching softly on scorched stone. You see, she began, we humans, we don't do galactic war the same way you do. We're a little more, she searched for the word, squinting up at the sky. Efficient. Kashan snarled. You're a fool. Abigail blinked. You say that like it's an insult. I graduated MIT at 15, Kashan. Invented a field destabilizer using 2 microwaves and my ex's wedding ring. But sure, call me a fool. Zergal whispered again to his colleagues, pulling up a profile on a holographic screen. Earth's military archives showed a sanitized version of her service record. Commendations, black-barred missions, psychological clearances, stamped classified. But something else emerged as they dug deeper. war game simulations where she out-strategized entire armies using nothing but misinformation and one laptop. And a report from the Battle of Titan Prime, the one Earth had never officially claimed. She shouldn't be alive, Zergal murmured. Abigail had by now sat down on the edge of the dais, legs dangling. She was humming a tune, some old Earth folk song, as if she were in no rush at all. Kashun stepped close, towering over her. Why did Earth send you alone? She looked up, smiled, and shrugged. Because I asked nicely. Zergal's pulse colors shifted erratically. There's something wrong. She wants to be here. Oh good. Took you long enough, she said brightly, not even looking at them. She tapped her wrist. A small blue light flickered to life, unseen by the crowd. A pulse signal. A message. A countdown. In the distance, strange sounds rumbled, deep, hollow vibrations that weren't quite natural. They could have been seismic shifts. Could have been something else. But no one noticed yet. Abigail stood up and dusted off her pants. Well, this has been fun. You've got your little show of force. Banners are nice. Good color contrast. The yelling a bit dramatic, but hey, I get it. Gotta impress the kids. Kashun snarled. You're mocking us. I'm trying not to, but you make it so easy, she said. Tell you what, give me a few hours, maybe a real chair, and I'll tell you where you went wrong. Spoiler alert, it starts with you thinking humans are prey. She began walking away, just like that. The crowd parted nervously. No guard stopped her. Kashun barked an order, but one of his aides hesitated. Sir, if she's who the files say she is. What? A ghost? Kashun growled. She doesn't leave wreckage. She leaves silence. The aide looked down at the cracked ground where the pod had landed. Hidden beneath the impact crater, unnoticed by any of their scans, were blackened scorch lines forming a glyph, Earth's military warning signal for infiltration in progress. Zergal's breathing picked up. She didn't come here to surrender, he whispered. She came to blind us. In the command chamber, high above the planet, several screens blinked and went dark. Fleet positioning arrays froze. The defense matrix rerouted itself unexpectedly. Unarmed mining vessels began quietly shifting into strange formations in orbit. A slow, creeping blindness began to take hold across the system. Abigail walked calmly through the war camp as soldiers parted before her, unsure whether to salute or shoot. She paused to admire a strange alien bird perched on a generator and smiled at it. The bird flapped once and took off, only to explode in a puff of decoy nanodrones, scattering sensor jammers across the base. No one noticed. No one except her. By the time she reached the temporary quarters assigned to her, she already had 2 data spikes uploading virus payloads into the enemy infrastructure. She dropped onto the bunk like a woman finishing her shift at a diner. Alexa, she muttered, start the distraction. Nothing happened, of course. But the Empire's environmental control systems did glitch for exactly 0.7 seconds across 17 bases. Down in the War Council, Kashun was yelling, "We will break her. Interrogate her. She will tell us Earth's plans." Zergal shook his head slowly. "No, she is the plan." Kashun turned, furious, about to shout something else. Then the lights dimmed. Across the planetary grid, subtle things began to change. A heartbeat slow tempo of destabilization. Logistics lines began misrouting. Power grids staggered. Automated drones began repainting insignias without orders. Abigail lay back, hands behind her head, and closed her eyes. Earth hadn't sent her to negotiate. Earth hadn't sent her to fight. They had sent Baba Yaga. And the Empire hadn't realized it yet, but the war was already over. Not with a bang. Not with a march, but with a smile, and a single whispered sentence, in a dozen languages, from shadow operatives scattered across the stars. She's already inside. The interrogation room was a cold, clinical chamber buried deep beneath the surface of Gorvaxis Prime. No windows, no corners, no sound but the low thrum of humming plasma coils embedded in the walls. The lights were intentionally too bright, designed to exhaust, confuse, and disorient even the toughest minds over time. The Empire prided itself on this room. Generals confessed here. War heroes broke in silence. Empires fell in whispers. Abigail Volkov sat at the center of it all, cross-legged, relaxed, and mildly annoyed. "This chair," she said, voice echoing lightly in the sterile space, "is the galactic equivalent of a DMV waiting bench. Did your designers major in cruelty or just fail art school?" Across the room, Zergal slithered into view. His movement was fluid, the motion of an apex predator with no need to hurry. He was older than most of the generals, a creature born under the shattered moons of Zarnal, with a reputation for breaking minds and boiling confessions out of warlords using only rhetoric and silence. Zergal did not introduce himself. He simply activated the neural pulse grid beneath the floor, an invisible field that subtly weakened the senses. To most species, it made their skin crawl. To humans, it was like a low-grade hangover in fluorescent lighting. Abigail just blinked slowly and rubbed her temple. Zergal watched her through his 6 iridescent eyes, and then finally spoke. "You've been quite talkative, human. But now we begin." Abigail leaned forward slightly, palms on the table. "Oh, so this wasn't the interview portion? Do I get a prize if I guess your trauma correctly?" He ignored her. "You are a soldier of Earth, a tactician, one the files describe as extremely dangerous. But I see only humor, deflection, mockery. Is that your armor?" "I prefer cardigans," she said with a shrug. "But yes, humor helps." Zergal flicked his tongue, tasting the air. The atmosphere was saturated with calm, far too calm for someone deep within enemy territory. He studied her posture, unthreatened. Her eyes, clear. Her breathing, perfectly steady. "Explain your mission." Abigail tilted her head. "Explain yours first. I feel like we skipped a dessert." A low hum vibrated the walls. Zergal activated the memory probe, an orb that hovered above the table, scanning brainwaves. It was designed to sync with the subject's subconscious, drawing images and impressions into visual form. The orb flickered for a moment, stuttered, then buzzed in confusion. A cartoon appeared, a cat chasing a toaster. Zergal frowned. "Oops," Abigail said sweetly. "Wrong frequency. You know what they say, never underestimate a human with anxiety and access to neural dampeners." Zergal growled. "You are not here for diplomacy." "Technically, I said I was the response, not the ambassador. Big difference." He leaned closer. "You came here to provoke, to sabotage. I came here to talk." "Lies." "Not really. I just talk differently." Zergal moved around the room slowly, the way sharks circle ships. "Your empire is weak. One soldier. No fleet. No defense. You joke because you are afraid." "No," she said, and her voice dropped just a notch, enough to freeze the air between them. "I joke because you are." He stopped. "I read your files too," she continued. "You broke prisoners using tailored pressure points. You dismantled resistance with precision. You speak 17 languages, and not one of them is kindness. Impressive. You know what that tells me?" Zergal remained silent. She smiled faintly. "It tells me you've never faced anyone who didn't fear you." The probe buzzed again. This time, it displayed a child's crayon drawing of a human woman standing over a pile of robotic limbs, a flower in her hair, and a coffee mug labeled #OneThreat. Zergal's mandibles clicked in irritation. "This mockery is the only thing keeping your heart rate from collapsing," she said coolly. "Because you're starting to wonder how much of this I planned, and whether I'm really here alone." He shut the probe off. Abigail clasped her hands. "That's the thing with humans. You hear our jokes, our songs, our messy politics. You see chaos, emotion. You think it's weakness. But all of that? That's camouflage." Zergal moved closer, almost too close. "Camouflage for what exactly?" "For a species that learned to hunt in the dark," she whispered. "That thrives on uncertainty. We are not the apex because we're fast or strong or cruel. We're the apex because we adapt, and because when someone declares us prey, we become their extinction event." The lights in the room dimmed for 0.3 seconds. Barely noticeable, unless you were trained to notice. Abigail didn't even glance up. Zergal activated a pressure field, constricting the space between them. Tell me what Earth plans. Now. Which plan, she asked. The one where we destroy your communications array, or the one where we turn your generals against each other by planting fabricated betrayal logs in your leadership channels? Zergal's pupils contracted. Or, she continued, do you mean the plan where your fleet security firmware was updated last night by a helpful maintenance drone that, if we're being honest, doesn't actually exist in your inventory? The silence felt like a blade. Zergal hissed, furious. There are no human fleets nearby. Our scouts saw nothing. Abigail leaned in, her voice low and almost compassionate. Because you were meant to see nothing. Zergal struck the table with a clawed hand. Sparks flew. Enough. She didn't flinch. Tell me who sent you. She smiled gently. My daughter, technically. She told me, Mom, go scare the space lizards. She's 6. Zergal's nostrils flared. You will break. Abigail's smile faded. Not vanished, just thinned, as if she was politely adjusting it. I've been captured before, she said, eyes suddenly distant. Twice. Once by a warlord who thought breaking my fingers would make me forget protocol. Once by a machine that tried to overwrite my mind. Neither succeeded. You know why? Zergal said nothing. Because every second I'm in a room like this, I'm watching. Calculating. Not surviving. Setting the stage. The lights flickered again. This time for half a second. Enough for alarms to chirp faintly elsewhere in the base. Enough for Zergal to glance at the ceiling. You've done nothing, he said, trying to reclaim dominance. You are just a woman in a room. Exactly. She stood. You had 1,000 opportunities to end this before I arrived. You could have negotiated. Could have asked questions. But you chose pride. So Earth chose precision. Zergal snarled. What are you? She considered the question. Then, I'm the beginning of your ending, delivered with a smile. The door hissed open behind her. 2 guards entered, blasters at the ready. Zergal waved them off. Return her to containment, he ordered. Put her in the vault. Full sensory deprivation. She turned to go, but paused, looking over her shoulder. Fun fact, Zergal, she said. Vaults are only secure until someone figures out the echo pattern in your locking sequence. Yours? It's 6 digits. Starts with 9. Because that's the number of lives you think you have left. Zergal's breath caught. And don't worry, she added cheerfully. I'll make sure you get credit in the after-action report. Right under the words critical mistake. She walked out, flanked by guards who avoided eye contact. Zergal stood frozen. Then finally, he activated the emergency protocols, silent lockdown, blackout mode, anti-hacking isolation grid. But nothing happened. The system didn't respond. The console simply displayed a message in human script. Nice try. She's already in. Across the base, small systems blinked out. Drones froze mid-flight. Doors cycled open and closed. In orbit, a faint distortion shimmered into visibility. Several massive shapes. Human stealth cruisers, uncloaking like sharks from murky water. And in the holding cell, Abigail leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. Smiling. It wasn't over. It had barely begun. Somewhere beneath the crust of Gorvaxis Prime, in a vault meant to erase sensory input, Abigail Volkov was meditating upside down. Not out of necessity. There was no grand tactical advantage to suspending herself from the ceiling using a strip of borrowed elastic and 4 magnetic buttons. She simply found the Empire's most secure prison cell to be boring. No stimulation, no sound, no taste. Just antiseptic air and the buzz of distant power cores. Perfect conditions for introspection. Or sabotage. Her boots tapped against the smooth alloy ceiling as she whispered numbers to herself. 3 minutes until step 2, she murmured, voice soft and amused. Outside the vault, General Kashan was livid. He paced the situation room like a warhound leashed too long, his fingers twitching against the handle of his ceremonial blade. Dozens of holoscreens flickered with live feeds from orbital fleets, base security networks, and intelligence sweeps across 17 systems. None showed signs of an incoming Earth fleet. None revealed the enemy's next move. And yet, nothing was working correctly. "We have static on half our orbital sensors," barked an aide. "Comms to the Eastern Hemisphere are cycling without authorization. Signal loops mimic protocol, but don't match." Kashan whirled around. "Is this her doing?" Zergal, seated quietly in the corner, didn't answer immediately. His eyes were still fixed on the message that had appeared hours ago, glowing in stark white on black. "She's already in." "She is not hacking your systems," Zergal said finally. "She is your system." Kashan's blade slammed into the table, splitting the metal top. "Nonsense. One human cannot." "She did," Zergal interrupted coldly. "And the longer you deny it, the closer you drift to surrender without firing a shot." An uneasy silence settled over the command chamber. In the center of the base, the Empire's tactical AI recalibrated again. Unprompted, troop assignments rebalanced. Defensive drones reassigned flight paths. Ammunition inventories adjusted themselves to accommodate supplies never requested. And every shift, every correction, pushed the base one fraction closer to organized collapse. No one could find the breach, but it moved like a ghost. Abigail unhooked herself from the ceiling and dropped into a low crouch, smiling to herself. "Time for the curtain call," she whispered. A soft hiss preceded the opening of the vault door. Two guards entered, armor gleaming, rifles at the ready. Both tried not to look at her, which proved difficult, since she was seated cross-legged on the floor, casually eating what looked like a protein bar and writing in a small paper notebook. "You're being transferred," the taller one said stiffly. She glanced up. "Oh, is this the deluxe suite? Hopefully, it has a window view." Galactic tyranny can be so claustrophobic. Neither guard responded. They escorted her in silence, though she chatted happily the entire way. "So, do your rifles have names?" "I always name mine. This one's Bertha." She tapped the side of her boot. "She's not visible, but she bites." The corridor was quiet except for the hum of electricity and the distant thump of malfunctioning drones. Occasionally, a light would flicker or a door would fail to close properly behind them. The guards grew visibly uncomfortable. "Don't worry," she said brightly. "That's just Phase 2. Mild chaos. Phase 3's the fun one." They didn't ask what she meant. They didn't want to know. Kashan waited in the war chamber when she arrived. He stood at the head of the command table, arms crossed, mouth tight with controlled fury. Zergal was beside him, quiet but intense. "I thought we might speak directly," Kashan said. "No more games." "Games," she echoed, stepping inside, letting her eyes drift lazily across the screens and blinking command relays. "But I barely rolled the dice." Kashan motioned to the guards. They remained at her sides, weapons raised. "You will undo whatever you've done to our systems," he said, "or I will take you apart neuron by neuron." Abigail turned to one of the flickering screens behind him, watching as a planetary defense satellite reoriented itself toward their own capital ship. "I'd hurry then," she said. Zergal spoke. "Why are you here, Abigail Volkov?" She turned to him slowly, head tilted as if weighing how much the truth to give. "I'm here," she said, "to be charming, confusing, and devastating, in that order. Earth knew you wouldn't take us seriously. Knew you'd expect brute force. So we sent me, one woman, a polite one, to talk, smile, and dismantle everything you think is power." Kashan's voice dropped. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" Behind her, 3 more screens blinked and vanished into static. "Fleet control just went dark," an officer whispered. "No, not dark," Zergal said. "Redirected. Look." Another feed displayed human ships emerging from cloak around the system's edge. Not many. Just 5. Enough. Kashan snapped to the console. "Return fire. Activate planetary shield grid." "Sir," the technician stammered, "the shields are already cycling down." On screen, the grid that had always been their fallback, their fortress, flickered, then collapsed. Abigail folded her arms, rocked back on her heels, and looked mildly proud. "I told your interrogation team this morning I wasn't sent to fight. I was sent to confuse you long enough for Earth to bypass every wall you built." You didn't lose the war today. You lost it the moment you invited me to land. Kashan lunged forward, rage boiling. You will tell me how to stop this. Abigail stepped aside. You can't, she said gently. But you can survive it. If you listen now. Zergal's voice was barely a whisper. Why not just destroy us? She looked at him carefully. Because Earth believes in mercy, she said. We prefer to offer a hand before a hammer. But we also remember history. And we don't forget prisoners of war, bombed embassies, or planetary blockades. Her eyes darkened just for a moment. You taught us not to trust you. So we adapted. We became cleverer, quieter. You were watching our missiles, but we were rewriting your software. You were counting armies, and we sent one woman with a laptop and a lunchbox. The room was utterly still. An officer whispered, Are the other human ships attacking? Abigail shrugged. Not yet. They're just watching. But if I don't send a signal in the next 4 minutes, they'll assume you killed me. And then, she let the silence hang. Zergal swallowed. There would be no survivors. Probably not. But hey, she said, producing a battered Earth communicator from her boot. We don't want to glass planets. It's terrible for our reputation. Costs a fortune in cleanup. Smells like melted cabbage. Kashan took a shaky step back. You mean to tell me this entire campaign was a setup? Not entirely. You were winning for a bit, she said. But winning against humans doesn't last long. Because we're not fighting the same game. She activated the communicator. Lieutenant Volkov to Earth Fleet. Standby mode confirmed. No hostilities at this time. Awaiting Council's terms. The voice on the other end, flat, professional, unmistakably human, confirmed the order and went silent. Kashan sank into his chair. You could have killed us all. Abigail sighed. Yes. But that's not who we are. You wanted war. You got strategy. You mocked our courage. You met our curiosity. And you tried to break our will, but forgot we broke our own bones climbing out of caves with sharpened rocks and spite. She took a step toward the exit, then turned back. Charm. Confuse. Conquer, she said. It's not just a tactic. It's our nature. Zergal didn't try to stop her. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Reverence. She paused at the threshold. You know, she added, almost as an afterthought, you should probably reboot your entire command grid. I may have left a few Easter eggs in the system. One of them starts playing Earth music on loop, something called Bohemian Rhapsody. If someone says the word defeat in the next 24 hours. She winked. Good luck with that. And then she was gone. The Earth fleet hovered in low orbit over Gorvaxis Prime like gods with hidden swords, silent but devastatingly present. 5 ships, each designed not to dazzle, but to end wars before they began. No grand insignias, no garish lights. Just matte black hulls lined with sensor-baffling tech and hull armor forged from pressure fields and dark matter alloys. They moved like they didn't need to announce themselves, like everything beneath them was already considered finished business. In the War Council chamber far below, General Kashan stared at the massive display screen in front of him, face locked in a frozen grimace of disbelief. The human ships weren't transmitting demands. They weren't posturing or threatening. They were simply waiting. Predators don't bark. They breathe. Zergal stood behind him, his voice lower than ever. She told us what would happen. Kashan didn't respond. His fingers curled around the edge of the table, claws biting into alloy. The silence was unbearable. Then a faint ping. Another display flickered to life. Earth was sending a signal now. No video feed. No ambassador's face. Just a text message, written in the universal diplomatic cipher. You may surrender now. No further punishment required. Kashan hissed aloud. It wasn't even a demand. It was a suggestion. A condescending mercy. A line so casually written it might as well have been a footnote. This is manipulation, he growled. Zergal, who had spent his life mastering psychological warfare, shook his head. No. This is control. Meanwhile, Abigail Volkov stood alone on a quiet ridge just outside the base, a gust of wind ruffling the edges of her weatherproof jacket. The planet's second sun had dipped beneath the horizon, casting a blood-orange hue across the rocky plains. She watched the light fade like someone who had seen it vanish 1,000 times before. War did that. It taught you to appreciate sunsets, if only because they might be your last. She didn't need to be at the War Council. Her part was done. The seed of fear had been planted, watered, and cultivated. And now it grew all on its own. Behind her, a soft hum marked the arrival of a small recon drone, landing on the rock beside her with a polite beep. "Hey you," she said, not looking at it. "Tell command I've initiated disarmament protocol. No casualties needed unless provoked. Offer them peace, the good kind. Let's see what they do with it." The drone blinked once, then zipped away. A second voice emerged from her comms, this time from Earth Command itself. Human, male, flat but respectful. "Lieutenant Commander, Earth Council requests a final assessment. Do they surrender or escalate?" Abigail smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the stars. "They've already surrendered," she said softly. "Their pride just hasn't caught up yet." Kashan stood now, arms behind his back ramrod straight. Around him, his officers sat like statues, still absorbing what had happened. All their planetary defenses had been locked out. Communication with outer colonies was scrambled. Their own ships were aligned in blind formations, facing the wrong directions, set to fire on phantom signals planted weeks ago by a woman who brought her own pen and coffee mug to war. No casualties, no explosions, no heroic last stands. Just silent defeat wrapped in diplomacy. "Send a countermessage," Kashan ordered. Zergal looked at him. "What shall it say?" He opened his mouth, closed it. They had nothing. No leverage. No bargaining chip. The humans had cracked their systems so thoroughly that any aggression would only invite immediate annihilation. But surrender, that was something his species had never done. Not once in its long, brutal history. "Give me options," Kashan snarled. Zergal raised one brow. "There is one." "Say it." "Send her back." Kashan looked confused. "The woman?" Zergal nodded. "The Baba Yaga. She walked into our fortress and left a hollow. If we return her, alive, untouched, it is not a surrender. It is a gesture, a truce between warriors. A symbolic white flag disguised as diplomacy." "Exactly. And perhaps enough to keep the blades sheathed." Kashan turned away, eyes fixed on the display where Earth's ships still hovered in silence, like vultures that didn't need to circle. The decision felt like swallowing acid, but he gave the order. Moments later, Abigail stepped back inside the base, not escorted but invited. A diplomatic chamber had been hastily arranged with alien silks and ceremonial torches. Theatrics. Kashan waited at the center, his posture radiating reluctant admiration. "You played your hand well," he said. "I told you I wasn't bluffing. I didn't believe one human could dismantle the military pride of 1,000 systems." "That's your species' flaw," she replied. "You think numbers outweigh intent." Kashan studied her for a moment, then motioned to the formal document before them. "Earth will receive control over the disputed systems. In exchange, we request one thing." "Which is?" "You." She raised an eyebrow. "Your presence," Kashan clarified, "at our next diplomatic summit, as Earth's representative, as a reminder to the galaxy that we understand now." Abigail stepped forward and tapped the edge of the table thoughtfully. "You want me to be your ghost story. We want you to be the reason no one else makes the mistake we did." She considered the offer. "And in return, you'll stop the expansion campaign. No more system annexations. No more POW camps. You'll play nice." Kashan nodded once. She smiled again, that same terrifying, cheerful, deeply human grin. "Then I'll see you at the summit." Outside, Earth's fleet received the signed agreement. The encryption codes were valid, the terms sealed. The war, such as it was, ended not with a final battle, but a single signature offered by a race that finally realized it had been outclassed before it ever fired a shot. In the galactic annals, it would be called the Silence Pact. But the soldiers who lived through it would remember it by another name. They would remember her, Baba Yaga, a myth given flesh, a monster who drank recycled coffee and joked about boot polish while unraveling empires. News of Gorvaxis spread fast. In every corner of the galaxy, alien commanders reanalyzed their intel on humans. They began training their officers in human idioms. They studied Earth humor like it was a combat technique. Entire military doctrines shifted toward understanding what went wrong. But some never found peace. Some, like General Kashan, spent the rest of their days haunted, not by the defeat, but by the ease of it. The terrible simplicity of it all. No armies. No fleets. Just one woman who smiled too often and talked too much. Years later, at the Galactic Summit, Abigail Volkov stood on a marble stage before 200 sovereign worlds. She wore no medals, no armor. Just a simple Earth Forces uniform, sleeves rolled and boots scuffed from travel. She stood in silence for several seconds before beginning her address. "We were told once," she said slowly, "that humans are too emotional, too chaotic, that we lack discipline, that we laughed too much, cried too easily, and carried grudges like bloodlines." She looked out at the crowd, her eyes sweeping across hundreds of different species, some stoic, some trembling, a few already sweating. "They were right," she said. "We are all those things. But here's what you missed." She took a single step forward. "We didn't survive our planet by being strong. We survived by being impossible to predict. We didn't conquer with fists. We adapted, iterated, and taught ourselves to destroy problems using pencils, duct tape, and sarcasm. We make fire when we're freezing, jokes when we're dying, and history when we're cornered." Her voice dropped lower. "So if you're thinking of testing us again, just remember, we're the species that invented irony and firebombing in the same century." A silence gripped the chamber. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, several alien delegates lowered their heads in deference. Not to Earth, to her. As she stepped off the stage, Zergal met her in the wings. He hadn't spoken to her since Gorvaxis, but now he looked older somehow, worn down by the memory of everything she'd represented. "You terrify them," he said. "I wasn't trying to," she replied. "But you did." She paused. "Good," she said. "Now they'll listen." And with that, she disappeared into the crowd, one ghost among many, leaving behind a legacy measured not in blood spilled, but in wars prevented. The cost of mocking humanity, they learned too late, was never immediate. It was slow, subtle, a creeping awareness that the smiling figure across the table might be calculating your downfall while stirring cream into her coffee. And by the time you realized it, it was already over.